Good afternoon and welcome to the Knit Shift episode 63. My name is Laura and today is Sunday, July 31st, 2016. If you're new here, thank you so much for stopping by my podcast today. I really do appreciate it. I hope you like what you see. And if you're coming back, thank you so much for spending a little bit more of your time with me. I live in Virginia. I'm an editor at a news organization and I live with my dog and my boyfriend and a lot of yarn in our apartment where I film from every week. Except last week when I recorded at my friend's cottage in North Carolina. So I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you to the kind words for Lennis, my friend who made an appearance. So thanks, Lennis, and thanks everyone for your feedback. Today I have a few things to talk to you about. I have a new knit along, I have details of my sock recipe by request, and I have a finished object. But before I get to that, I should tell you where you can find me around the web. I am on Ravelry as Yarnstormer, and we do have a group for the podcast, so please come check it out. We've been a little quiet lately, but I think we will be more active with details of a new knit-along I will discuss today. This podcast is available on iTunes and YouTube, and I'd love it if you subscribed on YouTube, then you won't miss an episode. And show notes can be found at theknitshift.com. And I think finally I am on Instagram as Laura Mahalski, which is my name. So there you have it. That's me around the web. So let's get to it. I do have a finished object for you today. It's one I'm very, very excited about. I love this. It's a pair of socks. It's my 9th pair of the year, which I'm thrilled about. I shoot for about 1 pair a month, so the fact that I have now knit 9 pairs of socks and it's only the very end of July is fantastic as far as I'm concerned. And let me tuck the ends in. These are not blocked or washed yet, but these are my Black Market Wool sock blank socks. And the name of this yarn, so Black Market Wool, the dyer did a curse words line. And sock blanks, if you're unfamiliar, are knit pieces of fabric that the dyer then paints or leaves a message on. And I said last week when I discussed these that I was going to bleep out the F word, and I didn't. So if curse words offend you, I deeply apologize. And I won't mention it this week except to say I will insert a photo of the sock blank here, and then you will be able to read the words on it. And so yeah, these are my sock blank socks. I am thrilled with how these turned out. I picked the sock blank. I love the pastel background that you will have seen by now because I will have inserted a photo, but I loved how much purple there was. This is the sock I knit first, and a lot of this purple in the foot and the heel, that is from the word unicorn backwards, so starting with the N and going up this way about probably for the U in unicorn. I love how much purple there is. You get into a bit more pastel going up the leg. And I will talk more about the sock recipe in a few minutes, but this is my normal sock recipe, and I did 40 rounds of 2x2 ribbing, and that gives it, I made these a little taller than normal. You'll see they run pretty much the full length of the widest part of the sock blank, the sock blockers. And I just wanted to, when I make my socks really tall, I like to make the ribbing extra tall to accommodate my calves. So I'm thrilled with how these turned out, and this is the second sock I knit, and you guys saw this sock last week in progress. I knit more than half this sock in like 3 days. Lennis and I last weekend went to see Ghostbusters, and I knit about 2 or 3 inches, maybe this much. Then when we got back, that was during the movie, and then when we got back to the cottage, I did the gusset, the toe-up gusset, and turned the heel, knit the heel flap, and I got to about here before the end of the weekend, and then I just carried on up the leg and did the ribbing, and I finished this probably 3 or 4 days ago. So I have just a little bit of the blank left. It says I am. And this end, I had started pulling the blank from the wrong end. There is a right end and a wrong end, and I don't know how to describe it except to say when you pull it from the wrong end, it stays looped into the opposite end. It's a little hard to see, but it doesn't just unwind as if it is unraveling a sweater. It gets caught up in the other end. So that's how I learned that I was knitting. I didn't start knitting with it, but I was pulling the blank from the wrong end. So I'm going to put some of this in my sock yarn blanket very soon, and the rest will be saved probably for mini skeins. I had about 15 grams left. So these socks took about, I did the math. Oh, someone just pulled into my parking lot very loudly as if they had very important places to be with tires squealing. Hope you guys didn't hear that. So anyway, I had about 15 grams left, and that means I did the math, and these socks took about 390 yards or thereabouts. It was a 460 yard sock blank, superwash merino nylon, and I used a size 0 needle because this was pretty thin sock yarn, I have to say. It's for my use, it was very thin, and I needed to go down to a size 0 from my usual US 1. And a size 0 is, I believe, a 2 millimeter. So I received a Ravelry message this week from someone named Danielle, who watches the podcast. So hi, Danielle. And she asked if I would share the details of my sock recipe, and I would be happy to do so. I did a little research after Danielle and I exchanged messages. I was hesitant at first because most of the socks I knit are toe up, and then I do a gusset and a heel flap. I find that that's what fits my heel best. And the gusset and heel flap that I do, it is a recipe I follow from a book. And because it's a book, a published book, a paid for book, I didn't feel comfortable sharing it. It's a book called Socks from the Toe Up by Wendy Johnson. And I basically wrote down her recipe, and I keep it in a note on my phone. And I know it now off by heart, but if I need to consult it, or if I'm, I just like to have a copy with me at all times. So I have it in my phone. But I did a little research, and Wendy Johnson, the author, she's the author of the Wendy Knits blog, which I'm not sure if it's still active or if she's still publishing, but she did publish on her website the exact gusset and heel flap that I use, the instructions for that. So I will definitely have no qualms linking to her gusset and heel flap instructions in my show notes. So keep an eye out for that. If you're new here, this is my dog, Gracie. She just had a birthday last week. She is 11 years old. I'm Grace. I was out of town when she marked 11 years. She had a very nice day with my boyfriend, so you good girl. You getting your snarl lip on for the podcast? So I will talk about my recipe in more detail in a few minutes because I'm going to show you a work in progress. I'm going to do a little toe comparison between my work in progress and some other finished socks I have here before I get going with my sock recipe. So I'm carrying this around in a dumpling bag that I got at Knitting Addiction in the Outer Banks a few years ago. Don't know who made it. Unfortunately, the person no longer is making bags, so says the store. I cast on a pair of socks for my dad for Christmas. I don't think my dad watches the podcast. I know my mom does, but Mom, if you're watching, don't watch it with Dad there, okay? Okay, so here is the first sock for my dad. You can see it has a gray toe, and then I get into some self-patterning yarn. The gray is opal sock yarn, which I've used for plenty of heels, toes, and cuffs on other socks. And the red and the brown and white flecks, or black and white flecks, is this newish to my stash skein of online super sock in a forest colorway. And there's brown and black stripes, and blue, yellow, and red, and speckles, kind of a Wonder Woman-esque with the red, yellow, and blue in my opinion. So just got these started. I'm knitting them on a size 1 Chiaogu. Chiaogu is basically the only needle I use for socks. And you will notice this has a huge, huge toe cup. I guess I'll share the recipe with you, and then I'll share my reasoning for why this has such a huge toe cup. The easiest way I can describe as to how I knit my socks is I knit them toe up, preferably 2 at a time, and I switch between a gusset and heel flap, which is this method, and doing a fish lips kiss heel, which, do I have a fish lips kiss heel? I don't know if I have I don't have a fish lips kiss heeled sock with me for my examples, but that's fine. But that's an alternative heel that does not involve a gusset. I kind of split between those 50-50. This is gonna sound silly, but if it's yarn, if I'm knitting for myself and it's yarn that I think is really special, I will definitely do a gusset and heel flap because I know that fits my foot just a little bit better, and I really want socks that I'm really mad about. If the colorway is super precious to me, I really want those socks to fit my foot really well. Such is the case with this sock, which is knit from Hedgehog Fibers twist sock in the Monarch colorway. I did a gusset and heel flap, and if you're unfamiliar with the term, a gusset is this part of the sock right along your instep, and the heel flap is a reinforced slip stitch heel. So those are what works. That's what I prefer for really, really nice yarn like this. So what I do is I cast on for myself, I cast on about 36 stitches with Judy's Magic Cast On. It's a 2 needle seamless cast on, so you have 18 stitches on the top and 18 stitches on the bottom of the foot. There are plenty of YouTube tutorials to show you how to do Judy's Magic Cast On. It's my favorite. There are plenty of other cast ons that will work for you. And then depending on my mood will depend on what kind of a toe cup I make. On these socks, I knit these one at a time. So when I knit my socks one at a time, I like to remember what I'm doing. So I generally will knit my toe cup. I will go around and I will increase every third round 2 stitches, a stitch here, a stitch here, a stitch here, and a stitch here. So 4 stitches per round until I hit about 68 stitches. I've been knitting socks long enough that I can kind of eyeball when the sock will fit me, if I need to go from, if I increase to 60 stitches overall, or maybe 64, or maybe 68. When I say I increase every third round, I do an increase round, and then I knit 2 rounds plain. And that makes a really gradual widening of the toe cup. I find that if I increase every other round, it's just too much of a 45-degree angle. This sock that I'm about to show you, this is a sock that the toe has decreases. Well, this is a sock I knit cuff down. So, but the point is, this was a sock with decreases every other round, and you can see it's a pretty small toe cup. And I have big toes. We all have toes of varying heights. This kind of toe cup is just too small for me. This is a sock I knit about 6 years ago. Out of some hazelnuts yarn. It's worn wonderfully. This is an Ann Hansen pattern. I can't even remember what it is, but it's just still really lovely all these years later. So I love this yarn. But I find that for me, that this toe cup of increasing every third round is what works best. So let me hold these up against each other so you can kind of see the difference between the two, just in terms of the size. So this toe cup ends right here, and this toe cup ends right here. So it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see this is just much deeper on this sock, which again, personal preference, it's just what I like. So, and this is a little disjointed because I'm kind of just speaking off the cuff here. What needle size to use is entirely up to you. I don't believe in gauge swatches for socks. I think the sock is the swatch, basically. I found that over the years I've had to get smaller and smaller needles to accommodate loosening of my knitting. So I knit my socks on a size 1 generally. You might find that you need a size 2 or a 1.5. Or you might be a really tight knitter and need to go down to a 0 or 00 all the time. Totally up to you. Whatever works best for you is that's what's most important, I believe. So I increase my toe cup until I'm at about 68 stitches, which is what I did on this sock. And I knit straight down the foot. I start the gusset when I'm about 3 inches shy of the length of my foot. The best way I can describe to put it is, put the ball of your foot meets your foot, and there's just kind of a lip there where the ball of your foot meets the rest of your foot, moving up toward your toe. That's where I always start my gusset. So for a gusset, I increase every other round until I hit a certain number of stitches. All of the specifics will be in the link for Wendy Johnson's sock pattern, her sock, gusset, and toe, heel turn, and heel flap. And then I turn the heel according to Wendy's instructions, and then I do a slip stitch heel, which reinforces the sock and makes it wear a little easier. I find that everyone wears their socks differently, but I really think that the slip stitch heel gives you a little more reinforcement when it comes to the wear on the, where your back of your heel hits your shoe. That can wear out really easily, and this gives it a little more reinforcement. I carry up the leg. I use the same number of stitches here as I did down here, about 68, and then I just start my 2x2 ribbing. Some people do it for about 15 rounds. I aim for about 20 to 30. I find that that's what keeps the sock up on my leg best. Because I really knew these were going to be tall and that this would need to fit over my calf a little bit, I did 40 rounds of ribbing, so they're a little bit higher, taller cuff than I normally would knit. Then to finish the sock, I do about 20 rounds of ribbing normally. In this case I did about 40, and then I bind off with Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off, and it really is surprisingly stretchy. Some people find that it flares a bit too much for their liking and it doesn't look very neat. I don't have that problem. I think I bind off rather tightly. Even though it is a stretchy bind off, I don't get that flaring problem. But the Russian bind off is another very loose bind off if you want to try an alternative bind off. So again, there are plenty of tutorials for both Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off and the Russian bind off online. And that's generally it for my sock tutorial, or my sock recipe. I hope you like it. I hope it works and comes in handy if you are newer to sock knitting. I really love vanilla socks. Just plain stockinette socks are my jam. It's my happy place. And more power to you if you knit pattern socks. I admire so many patterns out there, but I just know that for me, everything really clicks. Pun intended, clicking knitting needles. Everything really clicks when I'm just knitting stockinette. That's my personal favorite. So if you have any questions, send me a message on Ravelry, shoot me a note, and I will do my best to try to help you. Okay? On to stash enhancement. I have a skein of sock yarn that I got through my friend Lennis, the one you met last week. She didn't care for one of the 2 skeins of sock yarn that came with the Hedgehog Sock Club, so she destashed one to me, and I love it. So if you are a member of the sock club and have not received your package yet, please look away. Otherwise, enjoy. This is Hedgehog Sock in Agave. It is lovely tropical blues and greens and brown and yellow, and there are brown, orangey speckles and black speckles, and I just think this is so much fun. I think this would make an amazing baby sweater, so that's probably what I'll save it for. I just think it's so cheerful and happy. And I think I said this, but the colorway name is Agave. Oops, that's upside down. So there you have it. Hedgehog Sock, if you are unfamiliar, is a 90-10 superwash merino nylon. Really gorgeous stuff. I belong to the Twist Sock Club from Hedgehog, which I prefer because I like to knit socks more than I like to knit shawls, which I find that the sock yarn is better suited for. I'm a huge fan. I think I will stick with it into the fall. I think I'll re-up. It's a 3-month subscription, and I do think I'm going to re-up because I really am enjoying what I've received so far. And with that, that brings me to a yardage update. I am trying to keep track of my yardage in 2016, and it's been since March since I last gave you guys an update, and I'm really trying to knit out more than I'm bringing in. I'm trying to, take the stash down a notch or two. So I've been crunching the numbers, and I can report that As of late July, I have brought in 9,103 yards of sock yarn. Or I'm sorry, not just yarn, not sock yarn, although most of it is sock yarn, let's be honest. And overall, I have used or destashed or tossed about 7,968 yards. And the net change of those two numbers is that I've brought in about 1,100 yards more than I have used up, which sounds like a lot, but it's less than I've bought 3 skeins of sock yarn more than I've used, so I can easily keep knocking that out. Granted, with the Hedgehog Sock Club, I'm bringing in yarn every month, so that might not be as easy as I think it is, but it's just good for me to be accountable to myself and keep track of that kind of thing, so that's where that is. And with that brings me to a discussion of the next knit along for the podcast. If you watched a couple weeks ago, I discussed how I had tried to knit the Sugar Plum Shawl by Mina Phillip, which is a lovely pattern, but I just could not get it going for me. I kept making mistakes. It's not the kind of shawl that I should be making mistakes on. I think I'm just more of a chart knitter as opposed to having instructions written out. So I still had these 2 skeins of Hedgehog Sock kind of burning a hole in my pocket, and I really wanted to knit them. And the thought occurred to me, why not have a shawl knit along? No specific pattern, just any shawl pattern that you like or want to make. Doesn't have to be for you, it could be a gift, just a shawl, no strings attached. The only requirement is that you use at least 400 yards of yarn. Again, doesn't have to be lace weight, sock weight, worsted weight, whatever weight of yarn you want. And the one caveat to that is the more yardage you use, the more chances you will have of being entered into win a prize. So if you knit a shawl with 400 yards, you have 1 entry. If you knit a shawl with about 800 yards, 700 to 800 yards, which is equivalent to 2 skeins of sock yarn, or the majority thereof of the 2 skeins, you'll be entered twice. If you knit a shawl with 3 skeins of sock yarn and use almost all the sock yarn, you'll be entered 3 times. And the details about this will be in the thread in the Ravelry group, of which you have to be a member if you want to enter this stuff and be eligible for a prize. But I just thought it would be a fun way to knit a shawl for ourselves. It'll start tomorrow. It'll run through Halloween, the end of October, so 3 whole months. And the goal being that you have a really nice shawl for yourself by the time the weather, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, the weather by then will be nice enough to wear that shawl at the end of October. So that's the thinking. I will be using the hashtag TKS Fall Shawl, and that's TKS as in the knit shift. So you can follow along with that hashtag on Instagram. Tag me in your photos. If your Instagram is public, tag me in it. I will get that notification and I will have a look. So yeah, so that's what I was thinking for a knit along. I hope you guys will be game for that. I have some good prizes lined up, both for my stash and contributions from people for previous knit-alongs. So yeah, so that is everything for this week. Oh, okay. Oh, that reminds me, I am going to start a giveaway thread in Ravelry for a shawl pattern that was generously donated by Boston Jen of the Downseller Studio audio podcast. She generously donated a copy of her new pattern, Riley Rose, to me, and offered to make one available for you guys too. So I will have a thread in the Ravelry group for this shawl. I don't know what the prompt will be yet, but I'll get there. So if you're interested in winning a pattern of her shawl, a copy of her new shawl, Riley Rose, please head over to Ravelry and have a look. I think that's everything for this week. So with that, please have a fantastic week, and I look forward to seeing you next week.